I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. And we just must imagine that there's a flag in this corner. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join us in a moment of silence as we reflect on those serving in the United States Armed Forces, both past and present, the elected leaders for the state of Pennsylvania, and elected leaders of our nation. We have much to be thankful for in our community. Please be seated. Item 3.1, executive session announcement. There was an executive session Monday, June 20th, 2016 at 6:45 in the high school library to discuss personnel matters. Item 4.1, superintendent's report. Dr. Christian.
Thank you, Mrs. Wolf. I have a few comments this evening. First, on June 10th, our class of 2016 graduated. It was a beautiful evening, wonderful ceremony, and we certainly wish all of our graduates the best of luck in their future endeavors. Last week, the third annual Faculty Teacher Tech Academy was held. We had 200 teachers, administrators, and supervisors in attendance as they learned various pieces of technology, including incorporating iPads and mobile devices into their instruction. We always emphasize that technology does not replace instruction. It is merely the vehicle we use to deliver it. We've had great success with our tech academies for 3 straight years now. Finally, last month the board received comments from our public regarding our start time for our secondary students. As an aside, I'd like to comment, we certainly care about our students' health, wellness, and safety, and we certainly appreciate the research concerning teens and sleep. I've talked with my colleagues throughout the county about this topic thoroughly. We have begun initiating changes to our program of studies to accommodate this concern. This coming year, we're including a sleep hygiene unit in our health courses in grades 6, 8, and 11. We also have added a sleep diary for grade 6. We're offering an increased number of blended or cyber courses, particularly during first period, so that students who want to take advantage of more rest can arrive to school later. Also, senior privilege is offered at the beginning of each day for late arrival. We'll continue to work with our faculty and administration, and I really think the opportunity for the cyber courses as we increase the number of courses that are offered, we're up to 11 now, and hopefully we'll be in the 20s next year. I talked with Dr. Marchini recently, and he really feels that most of our juniors and seniors should be able to take advantage of this if they would like to. We're still monitoring subscription in those classes, but we hope that their popularity increases. There are some operational changes that we have to realize before the board would consider such a monumental change. They include, if you consider simply flipping elementary and secondary start times, as Westchester talked about, that would necessitate putting our elementary students at the bus stops at 6:30 or maybe even a little bit earlier, and that's not a palatable resolution. If we would run all of our buses at 8:30, that would cause an increase in transportation costs by several $million. Also, our calendars for our VOTEC and special ed programs and our non-pubs are all coordinated with 11 other Chester County school districts, none of which are changing their start times for 2016. And certainly our co-curricular and extracurricular activities would be impacted. And I'm also concerned that a switch in start times would generate the idea that sometimes families would fill that time in the morning with practices or extracurricular activities prior to school. It's not a dead issue. We should continue to look at it, and I'll work with my colleagues in the county, as well as Dr. Acosta and Dr. Soder, and look at this throughout 2016 and 17, and come back to the board with more information prior to the start of school in 2017. That concludes my report, Mrs. Wolf.
Thank you, Dr. Christian. Item 5.1, public comment on agenda items. Information, proposals, and statements from individuals or delegations pertaining to items on the agenda. Speakers are to indicate your name, township of residence, and the items on the agenda to which your comments are addressed. Speakers will be limited to not more than 3 minutes. Okay. Seeing none, item 6.
I'm sorry, did you want that, speaking on that now?
If it's on the agenda, so it would be at the end on the second time for public comment? If it's not on the agenda? Okay.
Speaking to what Dr. Christian just spoke about.
Oh, okay, then that would be the second comment. Okay. 6.1, Committee of the Whole. We have not had a Committee of the Whole meeting as between the last full board meeting and this one. 6.2, Buildings and Grounds Committee, Mrs. Booth.
Good evening. Buildings and Grounds Committee met Monday, June 13, 2016 at the West Vincent Elementary School Commons area. Marietta, Maine was in attendance. Agenda items were as follows. The East Vincent Facility Improvements Project, our glowing jewel, is moving along rapidly. All construction contractors are in alignment, and we look forward to hitting our completion timeline. We're beginning student occupancy transition planning. Also reviewed were and discussed with project updates, construction change orders, and construction project cost summary. The East Vincent Facility Improvements Project, this is slow moving at the moment, but proceeding nonetheless. A request was made for available board members at that moment to attend the East Coventry Planning Commission meeting Wednesday, June 15th. District involvement in that meeting was subsequently canceled. Also discussed and reviewed was a project update, project cost summary, including a review of the add, deduct, alternates list going forward. 2 dates of interest regarding East Coventry, the East Coventry project on the East Coventry Township's July calendar are Monday, July 11th, East Coventry Supervisors Meeting, and Wednesday, July 20th, East Coventry Planning Commission Meeting. Whether there's any need for board members to attend or desire, we'll let you know as the time gets closer. Any help we can get in supporting us is wonderful. All involved parties are working to meet East Coventry's procedural requirements and various agency approvals to facilitate the quickest possible bid opportunity. 2016 summer facilities maintenance projects were presented by Mrs. Crumrine and Mr. Mike Shelgren. The schedule and issues were outlined, described, and discussed. B&G moved the following items to this evening's regular business meeting agenda for board approval. Item 13.14, approval of 2 construction change orders. One, the change order number GC-03 for the general contractor E.R. Stubner of Reading, Pennsylvania. The other change order is number EC-02, electrical contractor Phillips Brothers Electrical Construction of Glenmore, Pennsylvania. Item 13.5 is the approval of 3 planned service, professional service, and maintenance agreements. Number 1 is Johnson Controls Incorporated of Allentown, Pennsylvania, district-wide automatic temperature control system. Number 2 is the Stanley Security Solutions Incorporated of Indianapolis, Indiana, for the Key Systems 3-year 11-unit warranty. And the third is with Suburban Water Technology Incorporated of Gilbertsville, Pennsylvania, for Pennsylvania DEP operator services and required water testing for 07-216 to 06-30-2017. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Booth. 6.3, Chester County Intermediate Unit, Mrs. Barkis.
I'm going to give my report for both May and June, since if you recall, our May Chester County Intermediate Unit Board of Directors meeting was held later. So I'm going to start with June, though, since it was just recently, last week, June 15th. We had our meeting at the Educational Service Center in Downingtown, and like I stated before, every presentation for the year is based on one of the goals of the IU. So we had feedback given to expanding CCIU alternative certification program offerings. They include special ed teaching certifications for teachers, special education supervisory certifications, CT and vocational certifications, add-on certifications and endorsements such as online instruction, gifted education, even speech and language, but from what I learned is that you can't receive the medical money if they're not a specific type. So it's kind of just if they're going in, access money, if they're going into other schools that don't look to receive that. And then non-PD certifications such as law enforcement certification, commercial driver's license, etc. So it was a way for us to see like how those programs are then creating a revenue source for the IU, which is lowering our costs. We also discussed Dr. O'Brien's goals for next year, and I have them, and I met with Dr. Christian to talk about what will best impact OJR, and I have some notes and feedback. So once we get complete feedback from Dr. O'Brien, I'll share them with you so you know what the goals are for the IU as well. Our next board meeting will be on Wednesday, the 20th at 7:30 at the Educational Service Center in Downingtown. So that pretty much sums up. The only thing that I wanted to note for you is one of the certifications that we were talking about was driver's education on the road, and that's why I asked you that question, because apparently that's like a monopolized certification done at like IUP, and we were talking about the wait time for the Chester County on the road program and how they're losing instructors and they can't find more, and that's why I asked you if they were supplemental, the ones we hired, or if it was contracted. So something to keep in mind, because if we can somehow put that in the contract at some point, like that would hold them to being that position long term rather than getting tenured and then deciding that they're no longer want to take that on. Just a little something. And then they're also looking into seeing if they could bring that to the IU in the next few years as well, because we have this space at Cat Pickering for training. So then we get back to the May meeting, and we had the Chester County Student Forum present to us on the delayed start time. And I respect your comments. When this topic was brought up by the Unionville Childs Ford IU board member last year as a potential goal, my response, and when I met with Dr. Christian, was that nice goal, but not realistic, not our job to figure out. Over that time and doing my own research, my own personal situation, and then hearing more and more facts on it, Academy of Pediatrics now, the American Medical Association is now also suggesting that it's the way to go. And then finally hearing the kids present on it. And unfortunately, we don't have any representatives in the Chester County Student Forum, which is kind of discouraging in the sense that a lot of the work they did is that they surveyed their own teachers and their own students in their high school and got feedback. And I'm not here to plug anything or to get you to have my opinion, but what I do have for you is the information collected by the Student Forum. And what I would like to do is just submit this to all of you and make it your fun summertime reading. And if you're interested, I would say that maybe it's something that we want to invite the Student Forum to come present to us in either August or September. And then again, as a board, after you have maybe asked some questions, done some research, maybe it's something that we want to put on our district goals for an investigation. And like I said, nothing that's going to be happening next year or the year after, just something of like, do parents want this? Because 6:30 a.m. for elementary schools, some parents might be like, yes, I can get through 422 faster. Some parents might be like, no way, I don't want my baby doing that. So like, let's hear what the parents have to say. Let's get a survey to our teachers. Let's get a survey to our students, and let's make that one of our goals. Obviously, not flipping it and paying $3 million is not an option, but maybe we can just go ahead and see how our community feels about it and then report back to it after this year. I can tell you that Unionville Childs Ford, although it's not happening next year, but they're spending next year figuring out how they can implement it for 17. And the major feel of the board at the IU was that it's what's best for kids, but how do you do it in your own district is kind of up to you. And if it didn't come down to money, everyone would be in. So I can't speak for all of you, but I would like to provide that information. And then if you agree, have the students come out so that you can hear what they have to say. And then I would also advocate that we get students on that forum as well. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mrs. Barkis.
You're welcome.
Item 6.4, Curriculum and Instruction. Mr. Lakoff.
Thank you, Mrs. Wolf. The curriculum department worked closely with students and teachers over the last weeks of the school year. Students took AP exams and Keystone examinations. Results from these assessments will be available later in the summer and will be shared as part of the assessment update in the fall. The elementary STEM Day took place at the end of May with many projects on display. Students from all 5 elementary schools participated and came to the high school for a full day. They had the opportunity to interact with high school students and learn about the projects in the engineering class, the ATP seminar class, and they heard from the high school robotics team. A full school STEM day for the middle school also took place with projects and displays for many students. Groups of students explored different careers in STEM-related fields and participated in hands-on activities throughout the day. And to further touch on Dr. Christian's report earlier, teachers explored new technology tools at the beginning of the summer during the 3rd Annual Technology Academy. Teachers led sessions in iPad use, flipped learning, D2L, and technology with informal assessment. Nearly 200 teachers participated in either the iPad cohort or the general sessions offered. 4 new iPad cards will be added to each elementary school and the middle school in the fall. The teachers receiving the cards had an opportunity to use the new equipment and plan for the new school year during the Technology Academy. And as a reminder, if members of the board have an interest in other topics, please share those with me. The next curriculum committee meeting is scheduled as part of the Committee of the Whole meeting to be held on September 12th. And that concludes my report, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Lakoff. Item 6.5, Finance Committee. Mr. Freeze.
Madam President, no report, but I would like to update the board with, as you recall, last meeting, we all approved a resolution for some of our bonds to be reset. So tonight is just the update of those first 2 bonds that were reset. The first one that went out was May 24th, which was the 2011 series bonds. The net savings was $367,994, or it equates to about a 4.18% savings. And our big one, which hit basically the all-time low of the market, the market hit one day, and Jackie and her group decided to just go out and beat the market up pretty well, and the Series 2009 bonds went out on June 14th, and the net present savings on those equated to $1,418,715, which is a 16.6% savings to our taxpayers. Ultimately, that's $1.8 million in those 2 rebond settings that our taxpayers don't have to look to repay. There will be more updates as these continue on. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you for the good news, Mr. Freeze. And 6.7, Personnel. Mr. Hughes? Oh, I forgot 6.6. Sorry, Mr. Kleinfelter. Mr. Hughes, you'll have to wait. 6.6, Legislative and Policy. Mr. Kleinfelter.
Thank you, Mrs. Wolf. The Legislative and Policy Committee meeting met on Monday, June 13, 2016 at 7 p.m. in the West Vincent Elementary School Library. There were 10 policies reviewed during that meeting. Policy 209.1, food allergies. Policy 610, purchase subject to bid. Policy 611, purchase budgeted. Policy 612, purchase not budgeted. Policy 613, competitive or cooperative purchasing. Policy 626, Federal Fiscal Code. Policy 626.1, travel reimbursement for federal programs. Policy 808, food services. Policy 823, which is a new policy for naloxone. And then Policy 827, conflict of interest. All these policies are on agenda are on the agenda for approval for first reading, and that is item 7.13. That concludes my report. Thank you, Mrs. Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Kleinfelter. And now, 6.7, Personnel, Mr. Hughes. Thank you. Okay, item 7, Recommended Routine Matters. 7.1, Motion to approve Recommended Routine Matters. These are consent items, 7.2 through 7.13. Mr. Lakoff. Mr. Freeze. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 8, Approval of Routine Matters. 8.1, Motion to approve routine matters. These are also consent items, 8.2 through 8.5. Mr. Freeze. Mrs. Booth. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 9.1, Board Communication. Do we have any communication, Mrs. Carmrine?
No, Madam President, no communications.
Thank you. Item 10.1, Board Discussion. Do we have any board discussion this evening?
Madam President, I have an item or two.
Yes, Mr. Lakoff.
I would like you to use your plenipotentiary powers to dictate that for the balance of school board of all meetings, while the students are not present, have a dress code of business casual.
That sounds fine, seeing as I'm business casual tonight. We usually do that in the summers.
Thank you.
Yes.
And the second thing I was thinking about is all the rock stars I have in my acquaintance put a speaker very close to them on the floor that helps them hear what's going on, what they're saying. And unfortunately, I have difficulty, I don't know if anyone else does, hearing some of my colleagues when they speak. So,
So you're asking,
let's experiment one meeting. Let's put a speaker down here on the floor.
sounds good. Yes, I have trouble sometimes, too. Anything else, Mr. Lakoff?
No, thank you for your
Thank you.
indulgence.
Anybody else? Board discussion?
I
Yes.
second Mr. Lakoff's motion to go business casual.
Okay. I'm writing this down. So if anybody shows up with a tie, you'll be banished. Any other board discussion? Okay. 11.1, old business. There is none. Okay, item 12, new business, approval of personnel. This is consent items 12.2 through 12.4. If you look at, 12.13, sorry. If you look at 12.4, we will be voting to approve Jennifer Hunter, but we are separating the second person there, Elena Tobin. At this time, we haven't received all required legal documents. So what we will be doing is postponing to a definite date, which is July 20th, the next board meeting, and we will be postponing that vote till that meeting. And I just need a motion, a second, and an approval to postpone that. Okay, so it would be Mr. Hughes and Mr. Freeze, and is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, no, any opposed? Okay, so that will be postponed until July 20th. 25th, sorry, July 25th, when that item will then be back on the agenda. Okay, so now we're approving matters 12.2.12.13.
Madam President, can we separate item 12.13?
You want to separate item, I forgot to ask about separation. Okay, item 12.13, and what are you separating?
Just the whole item from the original consent, just so we can separate it as a whole. Or just so that item can be voted on as a whole.
Okay, so you don't want to vote on every last.
No, I just want, I have to abstain from 12.13 because it's my daughter's on that item, so I just need it separated.
Okay. Okay, we'll vote on the others, and then we will vote on swimming Swimming, okay.
No, you can do 12.2 through 12.
Right,
12.
we will do 12.2 through 12 point, but can't we do it to 12.13 and then make the divisions 12.14 and 12.15? And then we'll separate. Okay. Okay, but my concern is if they just abstain from 12.13. Okay. Sounds okay with me. Okay, so what we were doing is now I need a motion to approve 12.1 to 12.12. Okay, so it was Mrs. Huzzard, Mrs. Booth. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now we're at 12.13. And Mr. Kleinfelter,
I'm just going to abstain from 12.13.
you're just going to abstain for the whole thing.
Since my daughter's on the.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So you're requesting, okay, let me find out where we are here. Okay. Hold on. So you're in high school girls, and you're requesting to separate head soccer. Okay, so that will become item 12.14. Is that correct?
Correct.
We're going to vote on that separately?
Separation usually means a complete item, a motion that's already here, and you're really editing the item.
Right.
It seemed to me to be an amendment to the item, not a.
I know a few months ago, what we did was we took the item out and made it, like, instead of 12.14, we made it 12.15. And then do we vote on it as,
You have a separate vote for that item.
okay. All righty, do I have a,
I move to amend the motion by removing, help me out.
high school soccer girls?
Head coach.
Head. Okay. That's Mr. LaCoff. Is there a second to the amendment? Second. Mrs. Booth? Do I need a motion and all? Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Hold up. What are we voting on here?
We're doing everything except
Separating the head soccer.
we're separating the head soccer out of that whole shebang.
You don't have to abstain.
All right.
You're making trouble, you're out of abstaining.
Just sit there.
Okay, so we have all in favor? Opposed? Okay, so that has been amended. So we're now voting on 12, pardon me? Yes, we're now voting on 12.13 with head soccer removed. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Barkis? Mr. Hughes? Any discussion?
I will be abstaining.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kleinfelter. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries with the amendment. We are now voting on, we separated it.
Well, it's out, in other words, we haven't
Yeah.
voted on that one line item. So someone has to make a motion to vote on the line item. I'll do that.
Okay. We're voting on,
We're adding item 12.14.
right, we are going to vote on head soccer girls. Do I have a motion? Mr. LaCoff.
Second.
Second, Mr. Kleinfelter. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Yes. Okay. All right. You're another nay.
Sort it out. Did you hear everybody's vote?
Yes, 2 nays and 7 ayes. So are we all okay with that? There's 7 yeses, ayes, 2 nays. Okay. Any other, oh, we already asked for discussion. All right. All in favor, say aye. We have 7 ayes, 2 nays. Motion carries. Gee, that wasn't difficult.
Madam President, did we complete item 12 now? Is that-
Yes, we have. I had it all written down. I thought I knew what I was doing, but obviously not. You learn something every day.
Jackie,
Okay.
are we all right?
Oh, yes, I'm wrong. It was 2 nays, 6 yes, and 1 abstain.
No, not on.
Not on that one.
7-2, you have it.
Anybody want to sit here and speak for me? I'll just move my mouth. Yes, okay. We are on 13 now. Correct? Okay. Thanks for your support, everybody. Item 13, new business. 13.1, approval for school board members, superintendent of schools, and central office cabinet to attend conferences.
So moved.
Kleinfelter, Booth. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 13.2, approval of out-of-state overnight student trips. Mr. Lakoff. Who was over there? Mr. Freeze? Mr. Hughes. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 13.3, ratification for homebound instruction.
So moved.
Mr. Kleinfelter. Mrs. Booth. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 13.4, approval to establish a student activity account. Mrs. Barkis. Second, Mrs. Booth. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 13.5, approval of conference attendance. Mr. Lakoff. Second, Mrs. Booth. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 13.6, approval of student activity clubs and organizations.
So moved.
Mr. Kleinfelter. Mrs. Barkis. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 13.7, approval for amendment to extend agreement with YMCA. YMCA. Mr. Lakoff.
Second.
Mr. Hughes, any discussion? Oh, okay.
I'd just like Dr. Christian to make a clarification that this is a one-year extension, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I'd like that to be known.
Yes. And Mrs. somebody else?
I was just kind of looking for the same confirmation. Are we going to be investigating other possibilities in that year?
We'll do an RFP this end of the summer into the fall, so that then the board can make a decision really by December, January at the latest, which would give parents time to plan and allow for transition if a new one is selected. And we've made the Y aware of that as well. And they'll be given the opportunity to propose.
Any other discussion on item 13.7? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 13.8, approval of district insurance policies. Mr. Lakoff. Mrs. Booth. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 13.9, approval for authorization of budget transfers, fund transfers, and GASB 54 committed fund balance amounts associated with the final audited financial statements. Mr. Freeze. Mr. Lakoff. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 13.10, approval of request for proposals. Mrs. Booth.
Second.
Mr. Kleinfelter. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 13.11, approval of award of bid. Mrs. Barkis. Mrs. Booth. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 13.12, approval of Chester County Intermediate Unit Marketplace Programs. Mrs. Barkus.
Second.
Mrs. Booth. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 13.13, approval of rate of pay for dental and medical examiners and sports physicals. Mr. Lakoff. Mr. Hughes, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 13.14, approval of construction change orders. Mrs. Booth. Mr. Kleinfelter, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 13.15, approval of professional services and/or maintenance agreements. Mr. Kleinfelter. Second, Mrs. Booth. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 14.1, public comment. Information, proposals, statements, and/or questions from individuals or delegations pertaining to any item. Speakers are to indicate their name and township of residence. Speakers will be limited to not more than 3 minutes, and I'll be keeping time. Yes, it's your time. Okay.
Do I need the mic, or?
It does because of you do because of the recording. Thank you.
Is it on? Yes.
Yes.
And again, you need to give us your name and township.
Cheryl Herzog, Warwick Township.
Thank you.
President, board members, good evening. A lot of movement has happened on the topic that you know I'm going to talk about, school start times, since I last spoke to you. There was an article in the Pottstown Mercury. There was an article in the Huffington Post. This may be the first time that Owen J. Roberts has been mentioned in the Huffington Post, I'm not sure. Also, many articles across the nation in many different newspapers, in many different school districts that are looking at this. The Chester County Intermediate Unit Student Forum presentation and recommendation. A bill to study this issue was introduced by Tim Briggs of Montgomery County. It's Pennsylvania House of Representatives bill that will be looked at within 60 days, I believe. That has been introduced. I do. I'm going to give you handouts, and I actually have the bill here. And also, the American Medical Association has released a policy statement last week, joining the previous recommendations of the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Centers for Disease Control. There are many other groups that have made policy statements in the last few years. Let's see if I can read my handwriting. I'll tell you about some of them. The National Association of School Nurses and the Society of Pediatric Nurses, the American Psychological Association, the Pennsylvania Psychological Association, the American Psychiatric Association, the National Association of School Psychologists, the Philadelphia Society of Clinical Psychologists, the National Sleep Foundation, the National Education Association's previous secretary, Arnie Duncan, and also the U.S. Air Force Academy did a study for 4 years from 2004 to 2008, showing there was and indicating the results were indicating that there were significant negative effects on achievement of early start times. I think these voices are significant. They are respected. They tons of research, as you know, and they've spoken out. They've made recommendations. I think it's time that we pay attention to them. I think at this point, it's like knowing that cigarette smoking is bad for you and doing nothing about it. I think it's like knowing that there is lead or asbestos in your school or in your home and doing nothing about it. We know from definite research that there are mental, physical, emotional, academic, negative effects on kids from having to have their circadian rhythms not paid attention to by having to get up early. Not every single kid is affected by this, but most are. Most have the sleep onset delay 2 or 3 hours later than adults, than children. So I think it's time to look at it seriously. Dr. Judith Owens, who I've previously mentioned from Boston Children's Hospital.
Excuse me, you're over the 3-minute limit, so if you could just sum it up quickly, please.
Will. If you knew that your child was being exposed to a toxic substance that reduced the capacity to learn, increased the chances of a car crash, and made it likely that 20 years from now they would be obese and suffer from hypertension, you do everything possible to get rid of it. Chronic sleep loss is that toxic substance. I also would like to speak, maybe I can come back later, to Dr. Christian's points because I have things to say about that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very
Ms.
much.
Herzog.
Thank you. You can give them to Mrs. Frumline.
Right on the corner there. Go ahead. Got that twitch in my arm.
Hi, good evening. I'm Julie Arthurs. I'm from West Vincent. I'll be brief. I want to thank Cheryl and a lot of other people who brought this initiative forward. I am a parent of 2 daughters at O&J, one at middle school and one in the high school. We've been impressed with the teachers and the faculty. We're fairly new. They're very committed. And there's also a very good variety of after-school clubs, programs, and sports. The problem is my daughters can't participate in them without their grades suffering severely. By the time their classes are over, at the end of the day, they're literally exhausted. They can't participate because, again, their grades will suffer, their relationships will suffer, their social lives will suffer. As a family, we've done research. We've made dinner earlier. We've limited social media, no television during school week, so forth. You know, we've done our own modifications. But it's a real fact in our family and in our household. We all want well-rounded, happy children, and my daughter's energy levels or lack of energy levels are affecting their quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Arthurs.
I have a statement from somebody who's not here.
No, the person must be present. But we have... No, I'm sorry. Each person is limited to no more than 3 minutes. Sure, because we're headed down to request for information. So when we get there, go right ahead. Okay?
I guess,
Oh, wait a minute. I just have to call the... Okay, now we're on to 15.1, Board Request for Information. Ms. McCreary.
I have a question with, when we talked about transportation costs,
Okay.
when we are busing, like, does the IU address the private schools that we bus to within the IU? Does that make sense? Because a lot of the private schools start later than we do. So I'm just wondering if that's something that was included in any of those studies.
Okay, Chris and Dr. Christian could
sorry.
answer that for you.
One thing that we discussed at the IU meeting, and it wasn't really like during the presentation, it was kind of like in the discussion after the presentation, is that everyone has to figure it out for their own district. So like some of the solutions you're going to read about, they're not for O&J. They're talking about city buses and blah, 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 blah. So if this is something that our community wants, we'd have to come up with our own solution. There was a general statement that if it'd be so much easier if every district in Chester County did it. Do you know what I mean? And maybe we can utilize bus services, not necessarily us, like I'm saying, we use one that no one else uses. So there's just different pieces of that puzzle. With that being said, back to your question, Dr. O'Brien said that one of the things that would be the most almost difficult to figure out would be even if the entire county went to the delayed start time for high school. What about the charter and private schools that we use for busing? And I guess that it goes back to then your own schedule. Because if, let's say, every district in Chester County went to a delayed start time for high school, but not Montgomery County, and you have a charter school that's being served, it's serving both Chester County and Montgomery County children, they might not be able to comply to our start time, especially if they're K-12, because it's not affecting their entire population. But that's where you would then say, okay, what would the cost be to bus to private school A or charter school B if they did not comply? So that's kind of what we have to say. Do we want to spend time on figuring that out or not?
Logistically, with the probably 100-plus schools that we transport to within a 10-mile radius of the district boundaries, could there be some economies of scale with schools that would already have a later start time? Sure, but there also could be the inverse of that as well. So every year, the building of the transportation schedule is a monumental effort. So that's underway, and that changes just with the simple fact that seniors graduate and kindergartners come in.
Anecdotally, Mrs. Crumline might remember how many years back this was. We were trying to reduce travel times for certain students, and it will require a parochial school who will remain unnamed to let their students out 5 minutes early to cut, I think, 45 minutes off a trip, and they refused. Right. So I'm just pointing that because there's hurdles for that reason. I mean, I thought that was pretty arbitrary, punish their own students. And I wasn't going to sit and read all of this, Mrs. Barkas, while we're here. Do we address here or elsewhere the effect of a later start time and sunrise, sunset? Here's my concern. We don't have a single mile of safe roads in O&J Roberts School District. Are we going to have more children standing on corners in the dark? And that's got to be true for everybody in the county. So I didn't know if you already addressed it or it's something that has to be looked into.
It's one thing that's in here as the possible flip, and what are the pros and cons of those possible flips. But and I'm, like I said, I want to stay as neutral as possible and let you make your own decision. However, if you go to my middle school, high school bus stop, there's no parent cars. If you go to my elementary school bus stop, same spot, there's 20,000 cars. So I'm assuming that if we flipped, those 20,000 cars plus 5 are going to be there at 6:30. So, I mean, that's just my thing. But yes, it's definitely one of the cons that, they'll be up on street corners earlier, but yet then they're also going to bed earlier.
Well, I don't mean to be doubting Thomas, and I don't want to knock the idea, because I can appreciate a later start time. I certainly start later than this. But there's a parental involvement issue here too. I mean, if we have a later start time, then you got to make sure that it doesn't get lost at the other end when the students are supposed to be going to bed.
And that's the whole point of let's survey our parents. Our parents could come in and be like, no, this is not for our community, and then we have an answer. But rather than my opinion or your opinion or whoever's opinion, let's see, first of all, do you guys want this to be something that you want our district to look into for a year? And that means get parent surveys, student surveys, teacher surveys, costs, okay? At that point, you might say, yes, let's do it. We go do it. We get the information back. The information could be in favor of, neutral, or against. At that point, there's another decision to be made. Like, just exploring it is not committing us to anything. So I just think that at this point in time, with everybody that's recommending it, it would be silly not to, but at the same time, like, it's up to everyone.
Well, I would agree with that, to investigate. I mean, I'm not calling into question the medical studies and the medical value.
Correct.
Just the implementation hurdles that we'd have to.
It would definitely be, there were definitely hurdles. But yet, if the overall community and population of OJR is for it, I think then we serve our community.
Well, and I think, too, the discussion, we need lengthy discussion and what-ifs, and for a community to say yes, no, or neutral, they'd have to have all the facts, just like we did with redistricting, because they might say yes, and then, but it's going to cost you taxpayers $3 million more, and they might say no. So before we investigate, but before we make any decisions, the people have to be knowledgeable of all that's involved.
Correct.
And that's a lengthy process.
So if our district were to say, yeah, it's worth looking into, and you could get, like, the possible start time of elementary, the possible cost for busing private charter school kids off our schedule, the times of arrival at home, like all like the crucial data.
Exactly.
Then you have what I'm imagining with what Dr. Christian did with redistricting. You have parent communication sessions, and then give them the information, and then survey them. Then take the time to survey our high school students and find out why they're in favor of or against. Talk to our teachers, why they're in favor of, and then come back after a year and say, this is what we found out.
Right, because it will take at least a year. I agree.
I totally agree. And if it's done right, it should take a year.
Yes.
And then after that, it would be like, okay, so let's say it's all positive and we're just going to go for it. It's going to take a year to figure out how to implement it. So it's not like tomorrow, but it's something that instead of just saying it's too hard right now, or I don't think it's necessary, like, that's our choice.
Okay, so I think what we're concluding now with this discussion and Ms. McCurry's good question about how we bus and the times to the private schools is that from this point on, we will start an investigation and go from there.
And I also think it's important for everyone
Yes.
to be in agreement. So if we're talking about goals in July, like, that's a great place to say, I don't really care to do this, guys, or I think it's important.
Right.
Can I just ask a question?
Can she ask a question?
Can I ask a question on the subject?
We're beyond that, but
Yeah.
at the end of the meeting.
At the very end, you may come up and ask, but we're beyond the comment section, and this is a formal meeting, so we can't switch the agenda. Any other board requests for information?
I have a couple.
Yes.
I would like to just formally request for June's meeting, when we get the student activity, to get any of the accounts that are over 5,000, a breakdown of monetary amounts, what they're saving the money for. I know you've already provided us a description of it. But
You
I
mean
want
July?
in July.
Okay.
It'll be July. It'll be June's end report.
Okay.
And it's only on accounts, student club accounts over $5,000. Because they should have all their activity done for the school year.
Over 5,000, okay.
Okay. Also, I just wanted to make sure that we're checking in on our feeder programs, just to do a sanity check on the percentage of their participants that are ONJ. Okay.
Yeah. Didn't you send that to us?
You sent that data?
Yes, we did receive that, but they can send it again.
Okay. My last one is, do we have any status on RAW? I mean, Roberts
On-
Athletic Association.
In
I believe
regard to,
their
I'll have to
existence
follow.
going forward.
I know there's a meeting last Tuesday with Dr. Marchini and Mr. Bretz, so I'll get an update for you. I'm sorry, I don't have one this
Because
evening.
they touch a lot of the different organizations, and I know they're having some issues with the removal of the Serbans. Who's going to go forward with it? We need to try and keep its existence going because they do touch so many, and we successfully for O&J, we do a lot of Pac-10 stuff.
Okay, so you just need an update or
Just,
and I have
just ensure
where they are going
update
forward.
what's going forward, and administration just making whatever effort we can to keep that organization, because it is a volunteer organization, but it does impact a lot of the, they touch everybody. So that's where just miscellaneous things come to kids that the clubs don't have funding for. And that's it. Thank you.
Any other board request? No? Okay. Item 16.1, and after Mr. Lekoff asked a good question at our last meeting, I researched it, and adjournment at meetings does not require motion or second. So therefore, pardon me? Much less a vote. That is correct. So therefore, I adjourn this meeting. Thank you.